If you make over $400,000 per year and you're looking to buy an Airbnb for the tax savings and the cash flow, then you probably want to take the guesswork out of how do I know if I'm actually going to get cash flow? What's the right market? What's the right property inside of it? I'm going to run you through the framework we use to find hundreds of cash flow positive properties every single year, looking at the expenses, the annual income, and then improvements to make to the property. So let's dive into an example we already did for one property that cash flows positive. So there are going to be 3 steps you always follow before you confirm whether a property should cash flow negative, cash flow positive, or get close to breaking even. You're going to want to start with the annual expenses. And the reason that we start with the expenses is this is the thing that we have the highest confidence of interval in estimating. It's very, very basic to estimate and accurately project principal and interest, like the monthly payments on the home, the tax and insurance. Very easy to go to a local county assessor website to get the taxes, get insurance quotes. And then we're going to do the hard stuff, which is the income, and especially factoring in if we're making improvements to the property, will the income stay the same? Will it go up? If it's already been a short-term rental, if it's not been a short-term rental, how do we use comps? And then we're going to look at a couple of ratios and get a final golden ratio, this thing that tells us with a very, very high confidence interval, can this home perform as a short-term rental and cash flow positive? And then to what extent do we need to make any improvements on the home to get the cash flow to be even better? And that brings us to the bonus. Are there very simple, low degree of difficulty, high ROI, high return on time, very low time commitment items that we can do to improve the property in the next week or 2 weeks after we close? So let's start with the expenses. And I think this is where most people get things wrong doing this on their own. Most people underproject expenses like crazy. The easiest one to get right is your principal and interest and your tax and insurance. And this is basically where we're going to start with our debt servicing. Okay, so whether you want to include the tax and servicing or tax and insurance in there or not, this would be your debt pay down every single month. So there's principal and interest involved there, and then there's property tax, there is an insurance policy that you're likely going to get, and then pretty much everything after this, plus a couple of other small items, are going to be your operating expenses. So if you bought a home entirely in cash, well, theoretically, you would literally only have your operating expenses. So pretty much every property would cash flow positive. But the reality is you have monthly debt that you're paying down every single month. So your principal and interest, if you get a loan, if you get a mortgage, if you're seller financing the home, if you're taking over something subject to, there's PI and then there's TI, and all of those blend into PITI, which are pretty much almost fixed monthly payments. Property taxes will be significantly higher in certain areas and significantly lower in certain areas, as well as insurance costs. So for example, let's look at the PI. If I buy a $900,000 home, let's say for 20% down, let's just pretend that's $720,000 in debt that I'm taking over on this home purchase. Well, that monthly payment on that debt would be the same whether it's in Bentonville, Arkansas, whether it's in somewhere in southeastern Florida, whether it's in Panama City Beach, whether it's in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Those are going to be pretty much the same. So there's really no guesswork when it comes to estimating and projecting your principal and interest. Taxes and insurance, there is a little bit of projecting involved. Your taxes are pretty clear to determine within maybe 3 to 10% of whatever the total amount is going to be. You can look at what the last year's expenses were on a site like PropStream or a local county assessor's website. And you can also reach out to a local county assessor and just ask them, hey, what do you project that the tax assessment will be on this calendar year for this home? So you can break down that to annual and then monthly payments. And then the same thing for insurance. The easy way to do this is to just go to a company like steadily.com. They're a great platform for getting estimates for insurance quotes for an annual policy. Then you have all the stuff like utilities, repairs, co-hosting fees, any platform fees. Airbnb is going to be the big one at 3% of whatever your total revenue is. They take 3% of that cut. Cleaning fees, these are going to be a pass-through expense. So when you get a booking, when you get a reservation on Airbnb, there's going to be somebody who pays you for your nightly rate, and typically there will be a cleaning fee or a cleaning revenue that also gets sent to you. So you receive both those items. But it's very, very important. I recommend pulling out the cleaning fees from both your revenue and then both your expense projections. Why? It's pretty much going to be a one-to-one pass-through revenue, pass-through expense. So for example, let's say I have 6 average stays every single month. That would be 72 stays per year. And the average clean is around $300 per. Well, instead of having this almost $21,000 and change annual expense and annual revenue item, it's best to just ignore this expense and ignore this revenue. So don't include it in your expenses, don't include it in your revenue. Then you have your HOA, permit, and license fees. Most permits and licenses are one time. Some will have an annual renewal fee. If you have an HOA, obviously that's going to be annually, monthly, quarterly, however it's broken down. And then you'll have your pool, hot tub, lawn care, snow removal, anything like that. And I have an example towards the end of this video where we'll go through that. Then you want to do annual revenue. Now, this is where I believe most people also overproject, and they also get things wrong for very simple, very fundamental reasons. The first two items are really use AirDNA, use Price Labs, and understand the difference between the two. Both of these are getting data exported directly from two main platforms, Airbnb and VRBO. It's really important to recognize that AirDNA in almost every scenario is going to include the cleaning revenue in that projection, and then Price Labs is going to be devoid of the cleaning revenue. What you really need to do is you need to find some other comps in that property that don't have data that is being exported from Airbnb or VRBO. You really need to go, and I'm going to fast forward through this here, but basically you need to eventually get a local co-host or somebody else who manages a property in the area to also give you a breakdown of all of this, especially when you have the expenses finalized, especially when you have the revenue finalized. It could be a local co-host, somebody who already manages properties out there. It could be a local agent. Fortunately, on our team, we have relationships with both parties. So we either own properties in those areas, or we have co-hosts who manage properties in those areas, or we have people who are agents who manage their own properties or work with co-hosts who manage properties for them. You basically need to get really good at doing all this. I don't have enough time in this video because I want to keep it short to dive into the semantics of how you project revenue, but I will give an example of comps and how to underwrite revenue in a more in-depth video separately from this one. The final thing you're going to do is if the home is already live as a short-term rental, you do want to see the historical income and make sure that it's pretty aligned with what you have seen from AirDNA and then Price Labs. Both platforms are going to give you very accurate metrics for revenue. AirDNA is going to include the cleaning revenue. Price Labs is going to be without the cleaning revenue. And the occupancy and the average daily rate might be a little bit off. So when you see a seller's profit and loss statement or a reservations, booking, export, just be aware that you want to get as much data as you possibly can. But what you eventually want to rely on is it's really just recognizing the comps in the area. What are other homes that are slightly better, slightly worse doing? And then finally, this is going to be a bonus for this video today, things that you could and should do to improve the property significantly so that you get better performance than if it was already a short-term rental, what the previous owner or the existing owner had already done. So once you go through everything, so you're going to start with the expenses, get a rough idea of what a home on a conventional loan product at like 7% interest rate would do if you're putting down 20%, 25% if you're using a secondary home loan product at 10%. Get as accurate as possible with the expenses. I'll show you an example in a second. And then the annual revenue, I would not recommend that you do this on your own unless you are somebody who is super well versed in underwriting. What is underwriting? Underwriting is looking at an asset or a group of assets and determining with great accuracy how will an asset perform in the future. This is literally a very complex, very nuanced, very market dependent, very external variable dependent projection that you're making. And you really need to consider a lot more, even than just the simple stuff that I have here. For example, you need to take into consideration population growth in the state, maybe even in the specific surrounding area or the immediate area. Is there job growth? Are there benefits that this state has for people who want a better quality of life? Things specifically like, are there tax benefits to living in the state? For example, in Florida, in Texas, in a few other states, there is 0% state tax. So people living in California, for example, have an exceptionally high state tax that is taxed on their W-2, 1099, K-1 business distribution income. Well, they might want to move to a state like a Texas or a California. If these guys make $600,000 a year in their household income, they could literally save 50 to 70 grand per year just by moving out of California and into one of these states. So a lot of different factors. The final ratio that we do want to get really, really good at. So once you've had a good breakdown of you making expense projections, you making annual revenue projections, and then finding some other party. I think you can use a combination of local co-hosts or local property managers. You can find them in Google searches. You can find them in Facebook groups that are very real estate oriented. You can use another third party. There are other groups that literally underwrite properties and give you annual estimates, give you expense estimates. Just run your numbers past somebody else who has a lot of experience doing this. And then take those two numbers. So look at what are your projections for the annual expenses, look at what are your projections for the annual income, and then also you'll need the purchase price, because the first ratio that you want to be at is a yield, or another variation of this is literally just the 12 months of income. So any 12-month period over time, put that in the numerator, and then the purchase price in the denominator. So what does this look like? If I'm buying a $1 million home, I know that I want that home to have a pretty good confidence interval of being able to gross at least $150,000 in top line revenue per year. Okay. That is a very simple example of a 15% yield or a 15% ratio of gross income to the total purchase price. And then the second thing that you want to look at, because this is just going to give you a quick 90-second, like, hey, do I feel pretty good about going deeper and underwriting this property? I think for you doing this for your first time, you're going to have to go through the very deep, very nuanced breakdown of all your expenses and then the revenue projections and then do the yield. For a team or an individual who's more experienced, our team can basically underwrite properties in 90 seconds. And this is literally the first litmus test. So we look at an area, we know within 30 minutes or an hour of our own underwriting, and then find new properties in that area. What is the likely income on a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, 9-bedroom, 7-bedroom, whatever, with these amenities, with proximity to this sort of unique feature or unique access to like a lake or a river or a waterfront view, etc. We can do the yield equation pretty quickly. So this is how we look at literally thousands of deals every single week just to find a handful that we pass on to our clients that pass these metrics and then also benefit from some of these bonus ideas, these improvement ideas that I'm going to suggest right after. And then the final thing that we do is we literally take the ratio of the income to the expenses, and obviously we want it as close to above 1 as possible. We will do a 1-to-1 ratio if we recognize that on a deeper underwrite or with deeper negotiations with the seller, we can reduce some of the monthly expenses with trade-offs or just with better negotiation, get a better cash-on-cash return with like a seller credit. So getting $5, $10, $15, $20,000 back after we do an inspection report and asking the seller to provide a credit to our closing costs at closing. We want to get this to at least a 1-to-1 ratio as high as obviously possible. And then what we want to do is we want to have the best confidence interval on knowing if I'm going to close on this home, I should anticipate some basic improvements. What is the order of operations and what are the highest return on time? What are the highest return on investment? What are the lowest degree of difficulty? And what are the lowest cost, lowest risk items that I can do in order? Well, I think the number one thing everybody should look at before they visit the home, before they decide what other projects are they going to do, you should have a game plan of what you think from this other list. But do be ready immediately to show up at the property within a few days, a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, depending upon when you can visit the property after you close. Be ready to have a general contractor arranged to be with you and be on premise at the property, doing small touch-ups, doing small improvements, literally for maybe 3 to 5 days while you're at the property, and then build enough trust with them and recognize, hey, they're literally doing the work. They're showing up every day. You have the trust factor. You meet them in person. Another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days after you exit the property or leave the property rather, and then go back to your normal daily life. They're going to be doing the basic cosmetic touch-ups, things like cabinet and door alignments, things like making sure doors open and close properly. There's stucco, there's flooring, there's walls that need slight improvements, just all these very basic things. And then maybe final touches of paint, right? You and your spouse, if it's you or you and a spouse, you guys are probably capable and competent enough to take paint brushes and paint rollers and do professional, almost professional level paint jobs. If you really want to offload everything and let somebody else come through and help you while you're there, you can do that. But the basic cleanup, the basic touch-ups, those items, super, super important. And then every day you can recognize, hey, there's more stuff that we want to work on. Can you go to Home Depot and get this stuff for us? Can you go and pick up something else like this? Can you go replace this appliance? Like, here's a budget. Just find one at Home Depot. Can you buy it online? Can you help us coordinate it? Like, just maximize your time while you're there. The next two, these are more specific to Airbnb is really a platform where people are going for the experiences. Airbnb has not struggled to find its footing. It is very, very clear what the use case and what the value add of Airbnb as a platform is. There's no such thing as Airbnb bust. It is literally a very specific, nuanced group of people that they're appealing to, and that is larger groups of people who are traveling. So think of groups of 8, 10, 12, 14, 20 people. If you have a 4, 5, 6, 7 plus bedroom home, you're easily accommodating those groups of people. Who are you competing with? You're competing with hotels. So when a family or a group of team members, whether it's a business team. For example, I have a team of 16 people. We do masterminds every year. We meet up in different Airbnbs. We meet up in different countries. We go and literally plan in mind getting an Airbnb for our team retreats. Well, this happens at scale at an incredible level. There are baseball teams, softball teams, Brazilian jiu-jitsu teams, bachelor parties, bachelorette parties. It is more fun to literally be in the same physical environment like a home with multiple bedrooms that can house everybody. You have a common living room, common areas, rather than staying in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hotel rooms where one couple or one group of guys or one group of ladies is just in their own room. So you already have an advantage when you optimize and index for larger bedroom homes. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus bedroom homes. And then literally figuring out the mural, the accent walls, the what can you do to make your hero shot in the common area where a lot of people are going to be congregating. Think your dining room, living room areas, which are typically adjacent to each other. Think a game room, which we talk about next. Think a backyard, which we talk about next. I've seen people over-index on improving bedrooms and hoping that it's going to generate a lift in their reservations, so their occupancy and their average daily rate. I think your better bet is to start here with the murals, the accent walls. So think the green AstroTurf stuff. It can be like the pink neon sign thing that you see on top of those. I've seen other people do much cleaner stuff, which is not like a light neon sign. And then really simple design elements overlaid over those. So nothing crazy. The vertical wooden panel design, I actually have a client who just did a really, really good redesign for their living room. I'm going to feature that and a bunch of other winning designs in a separate video, so I'll go super deep. But those would be the two ones. So a mural or just a basic, simple design that is super classy, not overdone, like not, super weird. Just something that is just super, super clean in the homes is actually one thing that I personally wished I had known much, much earlier in my journey. I've already started the process of improving a lot of my homes, and I have other homes where I just haven't had the time to do it. These two, very, very simple, very, very high ROI, low degree of difficulty, can be done in 2 or 3 days. And you can literally show up at the property and have that design artist, somebody who's literally there, ready to support you along the way, so that when you get to the property, you can literally just start the day that you're there and knock this stuff out before you even leave. Game room and backyard, again, these are areas that are going to be common areas where people are going to congregate. You do want to put a lot of time and effort, depending upon the theme or the area of the area that your home is in. Are you appealing to a lot more people who do bachelorette parties? Are you appealing more to families? Are you appealing to different types of group travel? Your mileage may vary on which one you do next. I think the first 3, the general contractor, mural, accent walls, you're always going to do those right out of the gate, no matter what. You're literally going to have somebody, one GC and then one mural, interior designer. I talk about it in another video. You're always going to have them ready to show up at the property so they can start and typically finish before you guys even leave. The game room and the backyard stuff, I think the most consistent one that we've seen for the backyard items is literally just a fireplace, so long as you have space for it, so long as fires are permitted in the area. And then the oversized wooden chairs, basic patio furniture so that people can congregate outdoors. Even during cold season, you guys can obviously move that stuff indoors, move it into a garage or storage area. Canopy drapes, string lights, just these really, really simple ones. Again, hiring an interior designer, pretty straightforward. I'm going to look through a pro forma really quickly so you can get an example of what we typically suggest. And then the final one. And if you do nothing else, literally make sure you do this one. Super easy, low degree of difficulty. You can do this literally anytime you have your listing live. You could do none of the other items and just get better photography. Literally, get a professional photographer, have them oversaturate the heck out of those photos. You probably stayed at Airbnbs where you've seen people do this and you think it's tacky, you think it's weird, but I guarantee you it will increase your click-through rate onto your listing, which improves the volume total impressions that you then get because your click-through rate goes up through the roof. If all your other metrics stay the same on people who land on the page and literally the average number of people who visit the page versus the number of people who book, if all your other variables stay the same, if you quadruple the number of people who literally click through to your listing, you'll get massive improvements on the occupancy, the average daily rate, just the number of people who book at your place. Lowest degree of difficulty thing, quickest turnaround. Again, literally all it requires you is just to find a quality photographer on a local Facebook group or a really simple platform like a Thumbtack, like an Angie's List. There are a bunch of other platforms where you can find quality photographers. These are going to be the main items. The one I can't stress enough, lay place settings, and then stage the rooms, and then specifically 4 areas that have these amazing views overlooking terrain, ocean, lakes, rivers, what have you. Get somebody who can actually get you a really good hero shot of your balcony or your accent piece outside the home, like whatever is that super cool thing. So can't stress that one enough. I will talk about specific items like this that have really, really worked for other clients in another video. Let me switch over to a pro forma where we show you how this actually panned out for a client who bought a home like this. All right, so here's a great example of a home that a client closed on last year, and they've been live for almost 10 months. So we've gotten the updated numbers on what their average daily rate, their occupancy, and something close to what their annual expenses have ended up being at. And just quick disclaimer, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, these are all estimates. These are not things that are going to be one-to-one ratios. If you close on a $900,000 home in a similar area, I'm not guaranteeing returns. All I'm doing is just going through an example of one client who closed on a home. These results may or may not be typical, just giving you the example because I know people love case studies. So this was a home that was a $900,000 purchase price. They took over $810,000 in debt. So this was technically a subject to takeover. So they put down $90,000, took over $810,000 in debt. The interest rate was 4.5%. I believe this number was accurate for their PI. It might have changed, but I think this was the accurate number when they actually took over. And then taxes and insurance, they actually did an updated version of the tax assessment for that calendar year. So their property tax payments might have gone up, but this was what they were paying at the time that they took over. Estimated closing costs, I think it was pretty much spot on to this. I think we also got a seller credit for like $3,000 back. So their closing costs might have been a little lower than this. And then I didn't get final numbers, but this is what we had budgeted. So when I was speaking about the suggested improvements earlier, all in, they paid a general contractor plus furnishing plus other designer items. So like an interior designer plus somebody who can handle the mural. All in for the labor, parts, and materials, they all in paid just under $18,000. So I estimated these numbers, and when I went through this with them, they said this was pretty much spot on. They didn't have all their receipts and all the payments that they paid to a vendor last year handy, but they confirmed it was right around $17,000. So I think saying under $18,000 all in for those improvements is right about right. So what's really cool about this home is they closed on it for a down payment of $90,000. Their closing costs were right around here. So around $110,000, $111,000, $112,000 all in. And then you add in those other items, the $17,000, that got them to just around $126,000 entry total into the deal. What we did a good job of is we estimated the occupancy and then the average daily rate based on the home that had already been performing. So the home that they closed on, it was already live as a short-term rental. It had great income in the last year. It did around $135,000, not including cleaning revenue. We kind of figured we would get almost this 1-to-1 ratio of all the additional items that we suggested them improving, all in, parts, labor, cost of labor. The photographer, I think, was also baked in here. Once they got their listing photos live, we felt pretty good. Even though this home is starting from zero, we think it's going to crunch because it looks better than almost any other 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom in that area. So that was not the order of operations. The first thing that we did was we tried to get the monthly and the annual expenses as accurate as possible. And what you'll see here is the co-host that we knew they were going to work with, it was going to charge 17% of the total revenue, which I think this is going to be pretty close. That's literally paying the co-host on average over $2,000 a month or $24,000 per year. But again, their cash flow and their cash on cash for this home has been absolutely incredible. So again, the order of operations, we as a professional team did a pretty good job of budgeting for and estimating all the monthly expenses like principal and interest, tax and insurance, then looking at utilities, then giving an estimate for repairs and capital expenditure items, and then just anything else that we can think of coming up along the way. Again, I think we also over-indexed for the property tax right out of the gate. So I think this one is still pretty good. There's also a very, very high insurance cost annually for a premium for a policy in this area. But I think also it was really important just to over-index and overestimate what the expenses were so that there's always more cushion. And then hopefully in the first 12 months that they're actually live with this home, they actually do end up doing less than $128,000 in expenses. Right now, they're heading into their summer months. They're probably going to have a really strong summer, and that's not even the first full 12 months, so we won't even see the second summer included, but their next 12 months are going to be even better. So if you're still interested in getting a short-term rental and taking most of the guesswork out of finding sourcing, negotiating homes like this, and especially getting them on creative finance to reduce the down payment, reduce the total closing costs, saving $70,000 to $240,000 on average versus a 20 or 25% down payment with insane closing costs, and then also an insane interest rate. Almost nobody is getting under 6.5%, 7% on any 30-year loan right now. We help clients find better deals for lower monthly payments, with lower down payments, with lower closing costs. So if you've seen enough and you want to click this video to schedule a call with us, our team would love to help, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.